Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right, welcome to day 10 of the Devoted Reading Plan. We are back again to continue to discuss. I'm back with my friends, Collin, Shameeka, and Victoria. And so just jump right in. We left off yesterday with really just hearing this great story of how Isaac and Rebecca end up married, right? And that's kind of where we left off. So we get back to Abraham. Abraham hasn't completely gone yet, so we still get to go back to him here at chapter 25. Brief story, just kind of talking about some of his other wives and sons. Was there anything significant to you guys as you looked at the way that chapter 25 began specifically?
Abraham was wilding. I was shocked. I mean, one wife, okay. He took another wife, Keturah. I guess if you have, I'm like, you're old. So I didn't really feel like I guess you need another wife in your oldest age. But then all the concubines, that took me for a loop. It's something I think I've overlooked a few times, but he had concubines also. And I think it's interesting that that's what he did in his later years. And that wasn't his practice with Sarah. I mean, of course, Hagar was, their little situationship. But it just seemed like that wasn't his practice throughout most of his lifetime. So when Sarah passed, for him to have another wife and concubines, like I don't know. It just threw me for a loop. Like, why? You're older.
I definitely missed that. I'm like, did my version even say that? Because all I saw was that he remarried, and I was like, okay. But I thought it was interesting. Like, he had like 6 more children. Yeah. But we don't ever really hear about them. We did get to see their names in this text, but we only really hear about or talk about Isaac and Ishmael, and Isaac being that guy, the one that was really, honored and like really spoken about. But he had a whole nother, legacy of children after that, and we don't get to see much about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Lord says that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the older he gets, the more he tries to fulfill the promise himself.
Yeah.
Like he can't see, because he has one son, right, or two, in Isaac and Ishmael, but he can't, see who Isaac will beget and who they will beget.
Yeah.
Who they will beget, right? And so, definitely trying to figure it out on his own.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, shortly thereafter, Abraham dies, and so we get that brief piece on just this, a quick summary. He had other wives and concubines, and in that, they just kind of footnote put that in there. But then he dies, and I'll say for me, back to I referred to this a couple days ago, like Abraham's love for his son, but also his son's love for him as far as Ishmael. I did think it was amazing that Ishmael is there to bury him.
Yeah.
Right? Like Ishmael is there with Isaac to bury his father. And we know he had been sent away at this point, right? So like he had to have heard that his father had passed and made the trek and the trip to come back, right? And that may not seem like a whole lot to us, but like, they didn't have a car, or a plane to catch a flight back. Like he made a trip and and really traveled back. And so I did think it was so significant that he was there and he was present, because again, to me, it just signified that like Ishmael also loved his father as well.
And I love how like right after that we see Ishmael's lineage.
Yeah.
And it just shows that in the same way that Ishmael loved his father, the father loved him.
Yeah.
And even though he was sent out in the desert and almost seen as a forgotten son,
Yeah.
like the Lord still blessed him with more sons, and his promise came to pass with that nation forming.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. No, and I love that you brought that up because I mean, Ishmael has more sons than Isaac, right? Like his lineage really spread a lot faster than even Isaac's did specifically.
Yeah.
And so it was just really cool to see, as you said, just the fulfillment of that promise that he even made to Hagar and to Abraham when he told Abraham to let her go, essentially, right? We see the fulfillment of that. Yeah, so shortly after that, we get Isaac's sons born, Jacob and Esau, and really just even kind of some debate and tussle and kind of disagreements between the two of them that kind of gets started here at the end of chapter 25. Anything significant to you all with first just their birth maybe, but then also even how Jacob and Esau kind of interact with one another?
So I love how, like, before the Lord tells her about her purpose, she goes to him about her pain.
Yeah.
And I just think about my life. A lot of times, like, if I would have been in pain, like, I can't imagine, like, being in childbirth, obviously. But, like, when I'm in painful situations, how often do I go to the Lord about why am I feeling like I'm in a fight? Or why am I going through this? And what, you know, she realizes is that it's something that's bigger than her and bigger even than Jacob and Esau. But how many times do we reduce our pain to just certain moments when it has something much bigger in store?
I love that because
Yeah,
along that line, oh, so sorry.
No, I just said, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, along those lines, I even like how Isaac prayed for Rebecca himself, like that she was barren and he prayed for her. Like, first of all, I was wondering why are these women coming from this line are barren, right? Like Sarah's barren, Rebecca's barren. And later on, we'll find out that Rachel was barren too. And so I was like, well, Lord, what is the curse here of this lineage here that all these women are barren? But like you said, Collin, like Isaac, he went and he prayed for his wife. And sometimes we think that the things that are happening in our lives are like either the end all be all, or it is what it is, or maybe we go to a friend or somebody who's a specialist. But like the fact that like he prayed to the Lord about this issue, and then she also went to the Lord about her issue. Like I love just seeing this marriage of hindered on God.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I think like it's interesting to me because you know, as we have seen to this point and haven't kind of spent a whole lot of time on this, but now that you've mentioned even just how a lot of these individuals have struggled to have children kind of when they've desired to, I do think we have seen this repeated kind of point that like God is in control, right?
Yeah.
Like when it comes particularly even this specifically in this childbirth, right? Everything from, you know, whether it was the curse of Abimelech's house and that he's just holding up wounds and closing wombs, or the fact that, you know, Sarah couldn't, and until God said Sarah could, and this. And I think like, you know, that's one of those things that I feel like in our culture today, you know, that's one of the things we think we do control. Like we feel like we have control of, and we take efforts and steps to control in so many ways. But I think early on, you just see very clearly, like God defines it as like, it's up to me. Like when I say it. So, you know, back to even one of the points you made earlier, it's why every life is not by accident, right? Because God opened that womb exactly for that person to exist, right? And be here because he could, as he sees fit, close it at any point, right? And so, I don't know, I just see just his sovereignty, right? His control, and where his hand is throughout history, really, as we look through it, all these different examples, with Rebecca really being the latest one here. Yeah. What about just their struggle? I mean, we get this, it really sets the stage, right? So some of what God tells Rebecca, right? Two nations, this is verse 23, two nations are in your womb. Two people will come from you and be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. So there's this, foreshadowing, this prophecy of kind of what will take place with them, and it really sets the stage for some stories we'll read later. But what do you think? I'm just curious. What do you think Rebecca thought, like hearing this, right? As she's feeling this, you said, she gets the pain before the purpose, but like when she hears that answer, how much of that do you think, like, one, what you think she felt, but two, I'm thinking about like how does that dictate what she does next, right? And like how she even views the younger for the older. Like, I don't know, anything that you guys thought of or anything that stuck out to you guys, particularly with the difficulty that Jacob and Esau would encounter between one another.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, one, it does have to be very hard to hear that, like, God answered their prayers and this is a blessing from them, but then there's already conflict happening within the womb. And so I felt like I was able to see as soon as they were born, like, Isaac gravitated towards one and Rebecca towards the other. There was already kind of like even this division happening within the parents of like, I'm showing favoritism towards one over the other. And it could have been because of, Rebecca and them knowing the situation. Like, it could have like skewed her, reasoning as to why like she really treated the younger brother how she did. But for sure, it was like this clear favoritism happening in their family and division that was happening within their family, to the point where Rebecca was willing to just even trick her own husband and just do whatever it took to allow for this blessing to come upon the younger child, which was Jacob, right? Which was Jacob. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting the lengths that was taking to like allow for this youngest to override what was customary for them. Like, it's custom for the firstborn son to get the birthrights and like all these different things. And so it was just a lot of like just trickery happening and all kind of stuff. Yeah,
I think there's a lot there. I think one thing for Rebecca to understand is like she doesn't have the same experience as Jacob, where she's coming into an understanding of Yahweh at a very fast pace because, she doesn't have that same history. She's coming from Abraham's country. And so the fact that the Lord is telling her that the older will serve the younger, that goes completely countercultural to like the world that she knew. Yeah. And the fact that she obeys and sides with the younger shows that her trust in God. But I think what's interesting in like verse 26, it says that when the two came out, that his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. And I think what's crazy here is like Jacob doesn't know that Esau's going to be serving him, but he's still reaching for Esau. And I think that what this shows is that there's a lack of identity because he's reaching for somebody he's not. And he's trying to be like Esau, even though Esau's ultimately going to be the one serving him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this plays out. It begins. I'm sure Rachel's heard this promise, and I can only imagine how many times she's repeated to Jacob growing up, right? Like, this is what your future will be, because we come to find that, Rebecca has this favoritism towards Jacob, right? And so Rebecca constantly, I would imagine, tells him this because as he get older, the boys grow up, right? In kind of verse 27, they kind of go two separate ways, but at first opportunity to deceive and to exceed Esau, like he takes his chance, right? Yeah. And so, he gets the opportunity to essentially swindle him out of his birthright, and to establish and to take that from him. And to me, it seems motivated by either one, to your point earlier, like trying to be like Esau, or two, just again, hearing constantly all his life, like at some point, you will, exceed him and he will serve you. And so we just kind of see that play out there. But anything about just that dispute that you want to touch on before we kind of move into chapter 26? I don't know if there was anything in that, the way that he stole the birthright, that you guys found significant.
Yeah. One, I was like, why was it that easy for Esau to give up his birthright over food, and understanding like, yeah, he had been out and doing labor that I'm sure he was hungry, but like your birthright, like that was a big deal. That was a really big trait that I didn't think weighed like, the way that it happened. But also what I feel like I've been able to see this common theme start to come up is like greed. Like Jacob was very greedy to want the birthright and like all of that. And we later see like how you talk about with Laban, like how, maybe they probably wanted some more of like, this treatment or these different things. And I just really start to see that like that history of how greedy people can be in wanting these different things that doesn't even belong to them.
Yeah, he said so easily over vegetable soup.
Yeah.
Like, this was lentils. I'm just like, to me, the first thing that stood out was like, wow, like, did like Esau lack wisdom? Like, I wonder, like, and he said, how could he give it up so easily? Like, he's so short-sighted. And of course, we've all been thirsty and famished, and I'm not sure, to what degree, but it just seemed really significant for him just to give up the birthright over, he said, one meal.
Yeah.
Definitely some instant gratification versus delayed gratification type of situation there. Yeah. Okay. Well, we get to chapter 26, and Isaac kind of reappears here, and we're starting to get a little bit more of his story. We hear a little bit of God speaking to Isaac to reaffirm what he told Abraham, and then it's a situation that seems a lot like his father that kind of happens here. Anything in chapter 26, kind of this early part of chapter 26 that jumped out to you guys specifically?
Yeah, so like you said, just like his father, I think it's important to understand in Genesis that everything is the book of first, and there's symbols all over Genesis, and where Abram represents a symbol of faith, Isaac represents a symbol of the blessing. And so the value in this is that Isaac has to go through the same thing as Abram. So in your seasons of faith, you have to sometimes go through the same things in your seasons of faith that you have to do in seasons of blessing. And it's like, how do you handle it? Because Isaac, he is going to Egypt just like his father. And the Lord tells him, do not go to Egypt. And I think like if he would have followed tradition, he would have been outside of God's will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one thing that I noted, that the Lord specifically told him, like, do not go to Egypt. But I love that in the next verse, the Lord said, I will be with you. And from his actions leading up, I just don't know how much he actually believed that, right? Like, the Lord said, I will be with you, and I will bless you, and I'll multiply, and all these things, and do not be afraid and stuff. But when he gets there, he said he takes the same precautions that his father did to take care of himself and protect himself and his family and his stuff. But as it turns out, as we see that, the Lord keeps her from ever getting taken by any man, and Rebecca, that is. And then that he ends up, being, I think in verse 12, it says he reaped in the same year 100-fold. Like the Lord's like literally blessing him. I think this is like probably where it starts to set in, like, okay, yeah, Lord, like, You kept this from happening. You kept my wife from being snatched up, even though I had this lie that I was saying. But then the blessings come. And so I wonder if this is part of the journey of faith for him, and really learning for himself, like who this God is for me. Like, this is, I knew who he was for my father, but like, who is he for me? Yeah.
For sure. I'm like, poor Abimelech. Like, he done got bamboozled again. Same generation. Same way. But yeah.
Now, I think I love just God's willingness to repeat himself.
Yeah.
Like, I think, I don't know, as a parent, right? Like, repeating myself is not fun. Like, that's not something I enjoy doing. But God repeats his promise over and over again. Like, first to Abraham multiple times. And then even here to Isaac in this, right? Like in those first few verses, he tells him what he will do. Like verse 3, stay in the land as an alien. I will be with you and bless you. I will give you all the lands to your offspring, and I will confirm the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars in the sky. Then he gets down here to verse 24, and the Lord appeared to him that night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your offspring because of my servant. I'm like, he just continues to repeat himself. And I think like, I just appreciate God's willingness to do that, to not just say like, I told you what to do and I told you what would happen. Now just do it.
Yeah.
And I think one speaks to obviously the need that we have in humanity, how easy and quickly we forget things, right? Like how easily and quickly we either think the plan has changed, or we think that he's forgotten about us, or we think whatever. But God's willingness to just continue to repeat time and time again, this is what I promised you. Let me remind you what I said I would do. Just saying it over and over. So like I just loved seeing that his repetition, not because he has to, but in my opinion, is because he chooses to and he's willing to like help us so that we remember and don't forget what it is he said he would do.
Yeah. I was gonna say I thought it was interesting to see this difference though between like how Abraham was treated with his wealth versus like Isaac, whereas Abimelech before was trying to like, okay, let me see if I can make a treaty with Abraham. He's like, oh, you done become too wealthy, like you need to leave.
Yeah.
And so like it just seemed like Isaac had surpassed his father already, like in this day and age of where he was, but people were so like fearful and like threatened by him, and they were doing like not nice things. Like they're closing up the wells, all the wells that Abraham opened up, like all these things were being done, whereas Abraham didn't experience that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was more of an honor of reverence than what Isaac is experiencing.
Yeah. Good. So we see God confirm it with him. We see, there's this, obviously the deception piece. There's some conflict that he runs into, to your point, right? He's not getting quite the same favor, it seems like, that Abraham was getting. But then God does appear to him and remind him again. And he builds an altar there for him. And then there's another repetition. It seems like another covenant, right? In the same way, very similar language here, right? That Abimelech tells him, you know, we have clearly seen how the Lord has been with you. This is verse 28. We think that there should be an oath between us. Is another example of like, hey, we see the Lord's anointings on you. Like, let's do what we have to and do what we can to come alongside and make sure that we're not, you know, getting in the way of God here. And so we see that happen again. And then we kind of end with a couple verses here about Esau's wife specifically. But anything else here in chapter 26 that jumps out to you guys before we move over to our last chapter for today?
I wondered why Esau getting married, why it brought grief to Isaac and Rebecca. Like, maybe Rebecca, but like to Isaac too. Like they didn't give much context to it, but I wondered, I'm like, what was wrong with the wife? Like, was there something that was happening or taking place where they were grieved by this union?
Yeah.
Thinking the fact that they were Hittite women, I'm sure had something possibly to do with it, because he made sure that his son did not do the same thing. It's like, no, you're gonna go back to Padam Aram to get a wife, and you're not gonna get a wife from these Hittite women. So I think that was really interesting. I wonder, like you said, what customs or what about them, or like how they related, or what influences they brought that kind of grieved them. Because as we know later on, one of the big things that the Lord said to the Israelites when they were after they had left Egypt after enslavement, he had told them, like, okay, don't intermingle with these people, don't take wives from yourselves from these people, like destroy them, push them out, like, but don't intermix with them because they will steer you away from me. And so I wonder, like, what about these women specifically? You said the Hittites was grieving them.
I think we get a little insight in a later chapter because I think
Yeah.
Esau does come to the
He does.
conclusion. He understands why. He's like, oh, guess I should go get a wife from here now. But that's a little later. So, all right, we talked about the conflict a little bit that Jacob and Esau had kind of from birth, really, and then also the birthright. We get another kind of lengthier example here where he not just steals a birthright, but now he steals a blessing from Isaac specifically. And so very interesting narrative here that describes this. What jumped out to you guys about this story? Like we get a lot here from Rachel to Isaac to Jacob and Esau. I mean, there's a lot going on here. Rebecca, I keep doing that, but for Rebecca, anything that jumps out to you guys specifically in chapter 27?
It was this verse 5 that now Rebecca was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. It was interesting. She's like, she's listening, ear hustling.
Yeah.
But I keep having this thought of like, wow, like how painful would it be to know that like your parents against you, like that your mom is like plotting and scheming against you. So like here Esau goes off by himself, like nobody's got his back, like out here in the wilderness hunting for himself, doing all this for himself. Like he had no help. And while his mom and his brother over here collaborating and taking the easy route out and stealing stuff from him, like it just must hurt and he must grieve, because even before, one of the previous chapters, it said that Isaac liked him because of his game.
Yeah.
His wild game that he would catch. So I'm like, okay, do you really love him? Like, do you really love Esau, or you just love that he can hunt and you can catch this wild game for me?
Right.
So I just think for me, it was just heartbreaking just to think like, nobody really had Esau's back. Like,
And, I think the beginning of chapter 27, when it speaks about Isaac not being able to see, I wonder if that is about just physical sight or that he lacked vision. And like right before that, we see that Esau is taking all of these Hittite wives, and, he was just grieved by that. And now you're going to be the same one that blesses the son that you heard from the Lord say to your wife that the older would serve the younger.
Yeah.
And so now I think Isaac is trying to submit to cultural standards instead of God's standards. And I think Rebecca's manipulative behavior is actually warranted in this situation in order to prove God's promise true.
Yeah. It's always been like confusing to me, because I know Isaac was aware. He had to be aware of what the promise was.
Right.
right.
And it feels almost defiant.
Yeah.
Right? That he would go and still try to bless Esau and establish that in Esau, rather than, follow through with what God's plan was. And so, it feels mischievous, and it is mischievous. Like, let's just call it what it is, right? Like, Jacob has plenty of other examples here that we know the guy he's conniving. Like, he likes to figure out some ways around some stuff, right? So we can call that. But to your point, it's warranted and needed and necessary to ultimately fulfill what it was that God promised and said would happen. And so, I've always been bothered. Like, Isaac, you knew better. You heard it. And it's almost like, nah, like that can't be right. And I wonder, and it's just me, in my own curiosity here, not quite sure that this is implied at all, but like, I wonder if it was a situation where like the Lord spoke to Rebecca and he almost didn't believe Rebecca more than he didn't believe the Lord, right? Like that it was just like, nah, I ain't hear that from God, and I didn't hear that directly. Like, and so if coming from you, that it was almost like a doubt of that, and I think that sometimes that can happen where we don't trust, the God or the spirit that's in those that are around us, right? And like just confirming like, hey, I might not have heard that clearly, but like I trust the spirit in you enough to believe that if you heard clearly from God on this, then I'm just gonna trust God in you, like the God in you more so than even just the God that I hear. And so like I said, I do wonder if there was just this rebellion, this defiance on Isaac's part, because God didn't speak directly to him.
Yeah.
He spoke to Rachel. spoke to Rebecca. I don't know why I can't. It's these R's, man. And,
Yeah.
and obviously Rachel's next, so we get to her too. But yeah, spoke to Rebecca. So anything else though? 27. There's a lot here.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that because of all of Esau's experience and like him just ultimately having a grudge against his brother, he's like, I'm a plot to kill him. Like after my dad dies, like this is what I want to do. And it's like, it brings me back to the whole Cain and Abel situation. Like this killing or this even desire to kill your brother. Like, man, it just really goes to show just, you know, the wickedness that is in, you know, Esau's heart. And of course, like all the things that happen, like he probably justified it in his head of like, yeah, like this is worth it. But he forgot that he also like was like, yeah, I'm gonna give you my birthright for this food. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like he's like, yeah, I'm a plot to kill.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting, this like weight in this, like how permanent this blessing in this curse was. Like
Yeah.
the fact that like, no, he couldn't renege. Like I've never thought of my words. Like I think we mentioned it last week. Like our words having that much power and weight to say like,
Yeah.
I'm a blessing. This is what it is, and this is what it will be.
Yeah.
Because you know he blessed them in wealth. He blessed them in rulership. He blessed them in like familial headship. Like he blessed them in all these different categories. And so when Esau's like, well, what's left for me? Like it was dirty. Like it wasn't much. Like it wasn't like it just. I think it's interesting because it wasn't like he just came up with this stuff and was like, oh, I'm just going to like make something up. Like, oh yes, Esau, I'll make up a blessing for you. Like it was as if he heard from the Lord what he needed to bless him with. And like this is what was going to stand.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Like once those words came out, man, you just can't put them back.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, again, it's not something I think we give enough weight to.
Yeah.
And I know we again repeating a little bit of some of what we talked about last week, but like, yeah, there is the power, you know, life and death, right, live in our tongue, and just seeing that he, like you said, he was just like, I can't. There's no take backs. There's no reneges. There's no, you know, all right, I'm gonna bless you and say the same thing to y'all, right?
Yeah.
Like. And then just see whatever happens. I'm just gonna give you the same blessing and see whatever happens. It's like, no, I said it, so it will be so, right? And it is real challenging to me. I'm like, okay, well, what am I speaking over people, and what am I saying in that? But yeah, no, it is interesting that he just felt like once it's out, that's it. It don't come back.
And I think in verse 46, she tells Isaac to leave. And so the excuse she gives is, you know, I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women who I assume have come into the land because of Esau.
Yeah.
And this is why Genesis 26 makes sense. Like why they sandwich that in between the two verses is because Esau, he goes against God's will and submits to these Hittite women, but it actually serves as a purpose because if Jacob would have stayed, he would have ended up dying. But Esau's behavior actually led to it being a scapegoat for him to be able to go to Haran and live with Laban. And so like even in Esau's proverbial mistake, there was still purpose and a way out because of his actions.
Yeah, it's back to one of those points I think you made last week, right? That persecution ultimately led him to actually go to where his purpose would be fulfilled, right? Like it was that resulted in him leaving and getting to Laban and Rachel and Leah, which we'll talk about tomorrow. But like that persecution, that fear of death ultimately led him where he needed to go. And God often uses that trial, that persecution, that difficulty to move you into those places you need to be in. You know. Anything else just in this story? Yeah, I know it was a long chapter there. There's a lot of its narrative, but anything else you guys felt was insightful before kind of wrapping up today's conversation? All right. All hearts and minds clear? All right, amen. Well, Appreciate you guys joining us. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll be on day 11, and look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.